Hello, everyone. It's nice to see you again in today's story on the Boring Channel, an ancient story that science can't explain. Now we invite you to listen to this story. Hey guys, tonight we're diving headfirst into the deep, murky, and utterly fascinating waters of ancient astronaut theories, specifically focusing on those enigmatic figures known as the Anunnaki. Imagine, if you will, a world bathed in the hazy glow of a dawn still fresh with dew, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and the distant bleating of newly domesticated animals. You're standing on the fertile plains between two mighty rivers, the very cradle of what we call civilization, and the whispers on the wind aren't just carrying sand, they're carrying stories, stories of gods who walked among mortals, stories hidden for millennia. And let's be real, peeling back these layers of time and myth, you probably won't survive this with all your preconceived notions intact. Things are about to get weird, and wonderfully so. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. While you're at it, I'd love to know where you're tuning in from and what time it is in your corner of the world. Drop a comment below. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself blinking against a sun that feels somehow older, rawer than the one you're used to. The air is warm, carrying the earthy scent of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, those life-giving arteries snaking through the land of Sumer. This, my friend, is where our story begins, not with a bang, but with the gentle lapping of water against reed boats and the rhythmic thud of clay being shaped by knowing hands. We're talking roughly 6,000 years ago, a time when the very idea of a city was a brand new, possibly terrifying concept. Forget your bustling metropolises, your Teslas, your avocado toast. Here, innovation was a freshly turned furrow in the earth, a newly shaped pot for storing precious grain, or perhaps, if you were really pushing the boat out, a slightly more elaborate loincloth. It's a world both alien and intimately familiar because it's here, in these sun-baked plains of Mesopotamia, that the foundations of your world were laid. You trudge along a dusty path, the silence broken only by the rustle of barley fields and the distant hum of, what is that? It's the sound of community, of people learning to live together in larger and larger groups. Villages are coalescing, growing into the first true cities, Eridu, Uruk. These aren't just collections of mud brick huts, though there are plenty of those simple dwellings cool in the summer heat, huddled together for protection and company. No, these are becoming organized centers of life. You see figures diligently tending to irrigation canals, a masterful innovation that turned arid land into bountiful gardens. Historians confirm that systematic irrigation, developed in Mesopotamia around the 6th millennium BCE, was a cornerstone of Sumerian civilization, allowing for agricultural surpluses that fueled population growth and societal development. Without these clever waterworks, well, Sumer might have just been a very large, very dry allotment. As you wander, you notice the people. They're hardy, their skin burnished by the sun. Their lives are a cycle of planting and harvesting, of propitiating gods they believe dwell in the rushing waters, the arching sky, the fertile earth. And they're busy. They're inventing things that will echo down the millennia. The wheel, for instance, first appearing not for chariots of war, but for the humble potter, allowing for the mass production of storage jars and eventually for transport. Imagine their excitement, their eureka moment, probably involving a lopsided pot and a lot of pointing. They're also, crucially for our story, developing a system of writing. At first, it's simple pictures, little symbols scratched into wet clay to keep track of sheep or grain, and this is a fun little tidbit for you, beer, which the Sumerians not only loved but also used as a form of currency and wages. Yes, you could literally get paid in pints, and they had dozens of varieties. I can just imagine the water cooler chat, or rather the beer vat chat. Ugh, another day, another amphora of the boss's cheap dark ale. This writing, which evolves into the intricate wedge-shaped script we call cuneiform, is their voice, reaching out to us across the vastness of time. Thousands upon thousands of clay tablets have been unearthed, little windows into their souls, their laws, their shopping lists, their epic poems, and most importantly for our nocturnal exploration, their beliefs about the divine. These aren't just dusty museum pieces. They are vibrant accounts of a world teeming with spiritual forces. And it's within these texts, these whispers from the dawn of history, that we first encounter the figures who will dominate our journey tonight, the Anunnaki. But before we get to them, it's important to understand that the Sumerians didn't just invent cities and spreadsheets, because let's face it, accounting is as old as dirt, or at least as old as taxable grain. They also invented a complex relationship with the cosmos. They looked up at the stars, those brilliant pinpricks in the inky blackness, and they saw more than just distant fires. They saw patterns, they saw influence, they saw gods. The air grows cooler as the sun dips below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. The ziggurats, those massive step pyramids that dominate the cityscapes, begin to loom, their silhouettes stark against the fading light. These were not just impressive architectural feats. They were bridges between heaven and earth, places where humanity could commune with the divine. And who were these divine beings? Well, that's where it gets truly interesting. While their pantheon was vast and varied, a select group held a particular sway, their stories woven into the very fabric of Sumerian identity. There's still considerable academic discussion, and scholars still debate whether the unique Sumerian culture, with its sudden burst of innovations like writing and complex urban planning, developed entirely indigenously or was significantly influenced by migrations or interactions with other, perhaps undiscovered, contemporary groups. It's one of those tantalizing what-ifs of ancient history. For now, though, just feel the weight of that emerging civilization, the sheer audacity of humans deciding to build something permanent, something bigger than themselves, right here on the edge of the known world. They were, in a very real sense, making it all up as they went along, and what they made up would shape belief systems for thousands of years to come. The stage is set, the clay is ready, and the first whispers of sky beings are beginning to stir, and stir they do, these whispers, coalescing into distinct voices, distinct personalities, within the burgeoning Sumerian understanding of the cosmos. You see, the people of the Twin Rivers didn't just build those impressive ziggurats as architectural showpieces or as glorified grain silos, though keeping the grain safe was definitely high on the priority list. No, these structures were sacred, designed as literal stairways to heaven, or at least as close as you could get without sprouting wings and hoping for the best. They were built for a very specific, very powerful group of divine beings, the Anunnaki. The name itself, whispered in hushed tones in the flickering torchlight of temples, carries a weight, a resonance. The exact etymology and original meaning of Anunnaki remain subjects of lively scholarly debate, with various interpretations focusing on their lineage, celestial nature, or chthonic underworld connections. Some translations suggest princely offspring or those of royal blood, hinting at a divine aristocracy. Others lean towards those who from heaven to earth came, a phrase that certainly sparks the imagination and has fueled no small amount of modern speculation, which we'll definitely get to. For now, imagine yourself a Sumerian, looking up at the vast, star-dusted expanse and knowing, with a certainty that chills your bones and quickens your pulse, that they are up there. And sometimes they come down here. These aren't your fluffy, cherubic, harp-playing angels of later traditions. Oh no. The Anunnaki, as depicted in the hymns and myths etched onto those countless clay tablets, are formidable. They are beings of immense power, often associated with the most potent forces of nature, the life-giving sun, the terrifying storm, the unyielding earth, the mysterious depths of the waters. They are the ultimate authority figures, the cosmic landlords of a world that humanity merely tenants. Imagine trying to negotiate your lease with a deity who can casually unleash a flood if they're having a bad millennium. You probably make sure your rent, in the form of sacrifices and praises, was always paid on time. These weren't the kind of gods you could just send a quick prayer to via celestial Wi-Fi. They demanded attention and probably a constant stream of perfectly roasted barley and high-quality livestock. Their arrival, or rather their presence in the Sumerian mind, wasn't a subtle affair. They are often described with a terrifying splendor, a divine radiance known as melem, a kind of awe-inspiring, shimmering aura that could overwhelm mortals. Think of it as the ultimate power suit, but one that could also, strike you blind or cause your city to crumble if you looked at it funny. They weren't necessarily evil, not in a simple black and white sense, but they were definitely not always on your side. Their moods were as changeable as the Mesopotamian weather, capable of bestowing great blessings or unimaginable devastation, often based on whims that must have seemed utterly opaque to the humans below. One day, they might gift you with a bountiful harvest. The next they might decide your city is making too much noise and, well, let's just say urban planning by divine decree could be a harsh business. The Anunnaki weren't a monolithic block of identical deities either. There was a distinct hierarchy, a kind of celestial boardroom. At the very top sat an Anu, the god of the highest heavens, the ultimate patriarch, a bit like the aloof CEO who rarely visits the shop floor, but whose pronouncements are law. Alongside him, or perhaps conceptually beneath him, was Ki, the earth goddess. Their offspring and other associated deities formed the core of the Anunnaki Council, the Big Seven, who decreed the fates. Figures like Enlil, the god of air and storms, often portrayed as powerful and sometimes wrathful, the enforcer of the divine will. And then there's Enki, later known as Ea by the Akkadians and Babylonians, the god of wisdom, magic, and freshwater, often seen as a more clever, sometimes even sympathetic figure toward humanity. Keeping track of who was who in the Anunnaki family tree, their responsibilities, their rivalries, and their favorite types of sacrificial sheep could be a full-time job for the priesthood, probably requiring a very large clay spreadsheet. For the average Sumerian tilling their field or shaping their pottery, these weren't abstract theological concepts. The gods were real, their influence tangible. Each major Sumerian city was believed to be under the special protection of a patron deity, whose temple formed the religious and often economic center of that city. So, if you lived in Eridu, Enki was your guy. In Nippur, it was Enlil. Your city's fortune was tied to your patron god's mood and their standing in the divine council. This fostered a very personal, if somewhat trepidatious, relationship with the local Anunnaki representative. You'd bring offerings to their temple, you'd sing their praises, you'd participate in the festivals held in their honor, all in the hope of keeping them sweet and ensuring the prosperity of your community. And these temples weren't just places of worship. They were elaborate households for the gods. The statues of the deities, crafted from precious wood and adorned with gold and jewels, were not mere symbols. Through specific rituals, they were believed to become animated, inhabited by the essence of the god themselves. A fascinating and perhaps slightly quirky aspect of this was the Mesopotamian ritual known as mizpai, or washing of the mouth, an elaborate, multi-stage ceremony to ritually consecrate and bring to life newly made divine statues so the god could inhabit them, speak through them, and receive offerings. It was like a divine spa day and an inauguration ceremony rolled into one, ensuring the god was properly installed and ready to receive your anxious petitions. You wouldn't want your local deity to feel unappreciated or worse, unbathed. So, as you stand there in ancient Sumer, the weight of these celestial beings presses down. They are the architects of your world, the arbiters of your fate. They are distant, yet intimately involved. They are the source of all order, yet capable of sowing utter chaos. The very air seems to hum with their unseen power. You don't just believe in the Anunnaki, you feel them in the direction of the wind, in the fertility of the soil, and the terrifying rumble of thunder. They are the explanation for why things are the way they are. Why the rivers flood, why the crops grow, why some cities prosper and others fall. No word on whether they preferred business class on their descent from the heavens, but they certainly made an impression upon arrival, an impression so profound that their stories would outlive the Sumerian civilization itself, transforming and echoing through the cultures that followed, right down to the very edges of our modern curiosity. The sky is not empty, not for you, not here. It is the abode of the mighty, the sometimes terrifying but always awe-inspiring Anunnaki. The scent of damp clay fills your nostrils, a smell that's as fundamental to this land as the rivers themselves. You find yourself drawn, almost magnetically, towards the scribal quarters, usually a bustling annex near the temple complex or the royal palace. Here, under the shade of reed canopies, men, and occasionally women, though literacy was a rarer skill for them, are bent over their work. Their tools are simple: a stylus, often made from a sharpened reed or bone, and a tablet of wet clay, smooth and receptive. With quick, precise movements, they press the stylus into the clay, creating those characteristic wedge-shaped marks cuneiform. It's a painstaking process, each symbol carrying a weight of meaning, a syllable, a concept, a name. And what they are recording, what they are so diligently preserving for posterity, are the very stories we're trying to unravel, the chronicles of gods and mortals, the epics, the hymns, the lamentations, and the detailed, almost bureaucratic accounts of the Anunnaki's dealings. You lean closer, careful not to disturb the intense concentration. Imagine trying to take notes in a lecture, but your notebook is a heavy slab of mud, and your pen needs constant resharpening. And if you make a mistake, you can't just hit backspace. You'd have to smooth it all out and start again, probably muttering some ancient Sumerian curses under your breath. These scribes were the guardians of knowledge, the keepers of the sacred flame of literacy in a largely illiterate world. Their skill was highly valued, a passport to positions of influence and power. They weren't just transcribing, they were curating, interpreting, and ensuring the continuity of their culture's most precious narratives. And a significant portion of those narratives, as you're beginning to appreciate, revolved around those beings from the sky. One of the most famous and complete sources we have for understanding the Anunnaki and their world is the Enuma Elish, the Babylonian creation epic, which, while not strictly Sumerian in its final form, draws heavily on earlier Sumerian cosmological themes and characters. It tells the story of cosmic battles, the rise of Marduk, a later Babylonian deity often equated with or absorbing aspects of earlier Anunnaki figures, to supremacy, and the creation of the universe and humankind. Reading it, or rather, having it read to you if you're not one of the scribal elite, is like witnessing the birth of order from chaos, a celestial drama played out on a grand scale. And the Anunnaki are key players, sometimes aligned. These clay tablets aren't just dry recitations of divine lineages or abstract theological treatises. They are often filled with vivid imagery, with gods who possess very human-like emotions, jealousy, anger, love, and a distinct fondness for a good feast and plenty of beer. Remember their currency of choice? They describe the Anunnaki Council, the assembly of the gods, where major decisions were made. Picture a UN Security Council meeting, but with participants who can literally move mountains or summon plagues if they don't get their way. The debates must have been lively. One quirky detail often found in these texts is the meticulous recording of omens, derived from everything from the patterns of oil on water to the inspection of sheep livers, a practice known as hepatoscopy. The Anunnaki were believed to communicate their intentions or warnings through these signs, and it was up to specialized priests to interpret them. Imagine the pressure. Okay, this liver spot looks a bit like Enlil on a bad hair day. This probably means we should sacrifice an extra goat just to be safe. It was a universe where nothing was accidental, where every ripple in the cosmic pond had meaning. But how do we know what these tablets say? How do we bridge the gap of millennia in a long-dead language? That's where the heroes of 19th and 20th century archaeology and linguistics come in. Scholars like Henry Rawlinson, who famously risked life and limb dangling from a cliff face in Persia to copy the Behistun inscription, a trilingual text that proved to be a Rosetta Stone for cuneiform, are the reason we can even begin to understand these ancient voices. The decipherment of cuneiform was a monumental intellectual achievement, like cracking an impossibly complex code. And as these tablets were translated, a hidden world unfurled, revealing a civilization with a rich and complex spiritual life, far more sophisticated than previously imagined. The sheer volume of recovered cuneiform tablets is staggering, estimated to be in the hundreds of thousands, with many still awaiting translation, holding who knows what secrets. It's like having a library from an alien civilization, and we've only just started reading the first few shelves, sometimes in conflict, their decisions shaping the very fabric of existence. And within these texts, the celestial nature of the Anunnaki is often emphasized. They are associated with specific stars and planets. Inanna, later Ishtar, a powerful and complex goddess often linked with the Anunnaki, was identified with the planet Venus, the morning and evening star. Anu was the sky itself. The god Nana or Sin was the moon. Their movements, their cycles, were charted by astronomer priests who saw in the celestial dance a reflection of divine will. Historians still argue whether the Sumerians and later Mesopotamians developed their sophisticated astronomical knowledge purely for calendrical and agricultural purposes, or if it was intrinsically linked from the very beginning to a belief in celestial deities actively influencing earthly affairs. It's likely a bit of both, a practical need interwoven with profound spiritual conviction. The stars weren't just pretty lights. They were the Anunnaki, watching, perhaps judging. So as you watch the scribe meticulously press his stylus into the clay, you realize you're witnessing a sacred act. He's not just making a shopping list for the temple, though those exist too, and are fascinating in their own right. 3 prime lambs for Enlil, 1 jar of best beer for Inanna. Don't forget the incense. He's etching eternity into earth, giving voice to the gods, ensuring their stories will survive the crumbling of mud brick cities and the shifting of riverbeds. He's recording their decrees, their battles, their love affairs, and perhaps, if you look closely enough between the wedges, hints of their origins, not just in the highest heavens, but perhaps from somewhere even more specific. The starlight seems to filter down through the reed canopy, illuminating the tablet, and for a moment, the distance between that ancient world and your own seems to shimmer and dissolve. The clay holds the key. If only we can learn to read its ancient language fully. The sun beats down, and the air in the temple courtyard is thick with the smell of incense and roasted meat, the daily offerings to keep the divine landlords appeased. You've heard the grand pronouncements, seen the reverence in the eyes of the worshippers, and felt the weight of the Anunnaki's collective power. But like any large, powerful family, or dare I say corporate board, the Anunnaki Council was not always a place of harmonious agreement. No. Peel back the layers of hymns and formal praises, and you'll find a celestial soap opera of epic proportions, complete with sibling rivalries, power struggles, and conflicting agendas that would make even the most scandalous reality TV show look like a gentle tea party. And at the heart of many of these dramas, at least as they've been interpreted and passed down, are 2 of the most prominent Anunnaki, the brothers Enki and Enlil. Imagine them. Enlil, often depicted as the powerful, authoritative, sometimes stern and even wrathful lord of the storm, the air, and the earth. He's the enforcer, the one who ensures the decrees of the divine assembly are carried out, the one who demands order and isn't afraid to crack the cosmic whip to get it. He's the god whose temple in Nippur was considered the religious center of Sumer, the Duran key, the bond of heaven and earth. If Anu was the distant chairman of the board, Enlil was the CEO, making the tough decisions, often for reasons that seemed harsh or inscrutable to the mortals below. He was, in many ways, the archetypal sky father, powerful but sometimes distant, his favor crucial, but his anger terrifying. You definitely want to be on his good side, ensuring your ziggurat was up to code and your sacrifices were top-notch. One poorly timed noisy festival, and Enlil might just decide humanity needs a bit of reset. Then there's Enki, later known as Ea by the Akkadians and Babylonians. He's a different kettle of divine fish altogether. Enki is the god of wisdom, of subterranean waters, the Abzu, of magic, craftsmanship, and creation. He's often portrayed as clever, ingenious, a problem solver, and sometimes, just sometimes, a bit of a trickster. While Enlil might represent the raw power and authority of the Anunnaki, Enki embodies their intellect, their cunning, and perhaps a more nuanced understanding of the world, including the fledgling race of humanity. He's the divine chief scientist, the celestial patent officer, the one who knows how things work. His primary cult center was Eridu, one of the oldest, if not the oldest, city in Sumer, significantly built on the edge of a marsh, reflecting his association with water. Eridu, according to Sumerian king lists, was the first city to have kingship descend from heaven, further cementing its primordial importance in Enki's foundational role. This isn't just some dusty historical fact. It positions Enki at the very beginning of organized human society as the Sumerians understood it. Now put these two powerful brothers in the same celestial room, making decisions that affect the fate of gods and mortals alike, and you can see how sparks might fly. Their relationship is one of the most complex and fascinating dynamics within the Anunnaki pantheon. It's not always outright animosity, but there's a definite tension, a difference in approach, in philosophy, if you will. Enlil often seems focused on the grand cosmic order, the preservation of the divine realm, sometimes at the expense of humanity. He can be impatient with mortals, viewing them as noisy, troublesome, and perhaps a bit disposable. If the early bird gets the worm, Enlil is the one who might just decide the worm population is getting out of hand and needs a good culling. Enki, on the other hand, is frequently depicted as more involved with humanity, sometimes even as a secret benefactor or protector. He's the one who, in many myths, takes pity on humans, who warns them of impending disasters, often decreed by Enlil, or who gives them the tools and knowledge they need to survive and thrive. Think of him as the slightly rebellious, more approachable uncle who slips you a bit of extra candy when your strict parents aren't looking. This dynamic is central to many Sumerian and later Mesopotamian myths, including the famous flood story, which we'll get to. It's Enki who often finds a loophole in the divine decrees, who uses his wisdom and cunning to mediate or mitigate the harsher judgments of the Anunnaki Council, particularly those pushed by Enlil. A rather quirky and telling tidbit is that Enki was also the patron god of artisans, and was said to have taught humanity the arts of civilization, from brickmaking to brewing, which is quite a hands-on approach for a major deity. He wasn't just issuing edicts from on high. He was, in a sense, getting his divine hands dirty. This isn't to say Enki was a straightforward good guy, and Enlil a bad guy. Mesopotamian theology was far more sophisticated than that. Both gods were essential, embodying different aspects of divine power and cosmic balance. Enlil's order was necessary. Enki's ingenuity was vital. But their differing perspectives often put them at odds, particularly when it came to the fate of their newest creation, humankind. Scholars still debate whether the portrayal of Enki as a more pro-human deity reflects a genuine theological divergence, or is simply a narrative device to create dramatic tension in the myths. It's a classic case of whether the story reflects the belief or the belief shapes the story. Perhaps it's a bit of both. The tales of their disagreements, their celestial arguments, their strategic outmaneuvering of one another make for compelling reading, even millennia later. It's like watching a high-stakes chess game where the pieces are cities and civilizations, and the players are beings of immense, almost unimaginable power. So, as you stand in the shadow of the ziggurat, you can almost hear the echoes of their celestial arguments, the rumble of Enlil's displeasure, the clever counter-arguments of Enki. The fate of your tiny, mud-brick world hangs in the balance of their divine disagreements. One brother, the enforcer of a strict, often harsh cosmic law. The other, the wise, sometimes subversive champion of ingenuity and perhaps, just perhaps, of you. Their conflict isn't just a story. It's an attempt to explain the very nature of existence, the struggle between order and chaos, between judgment and mercy, between the unyielding power of the storm and the life-giving persistence of the deep, sweet waters. It's a divine drama that sets the stage for the next, and perhaps most controversial act of the Anunnaki, their alleged role in the very creation of you. The air hums with an almost palpable sense of anticipation. You've seen the grandeur of the Anunnaki, felt the weight of their celestial authority, and even glimpsed the fraternal tension simmering within their divine council, particularly between the stern Enlil and the ingenious Enki. Now we delve into perhaps the most audacious and debated aspect of their legacy, a claim that echoes through the millennia, whispered in ancient texts and shouted by modern theorists, the Anunnaki's purported role in the actual physical creation of humankind. Forget gentle sculpting from dust by a benevolent singular deity. The Sumerian accounts, particularly as interpreted by some, paint a far more pragmatic and even somewhat unsettling picture. You weren't just a divine afterthought. You were, according to these narratives, a project, a solution to a cosmic labor dispute. Imagine the scene. The Anunnaki, these powerful beings who came from the heavens, are on Earth. They are undertaking significant tasks, perhaps mining, perhaps building, perhaps just enjoying the Mesopotamian sunshine, though the text suggests hard work was involved. The junior Anunnaki, the Ijajai, are tasked with the real grunt work, digging canals, toiling in the fields, and generally doing all the heavy lifting required to make Earth hospitable or profitable for their divine superiors. And, as often happens when there's a lot of hard labor and perhaps not enough celestial overtime pay, they get fed up. The texts describe a rebellion, a strike. The Ijajai throw down their tools, burn their cosmic pickaxes, and complain bitterly to the ruling Anunnaki Council. We can't take it anymore, they cry. This digging is killing us. Our backs ache. Our hands are blistered. Find someone else to do your dirty work. It's a relatable sentiment, even across species and millennia. I bet their celestial break rooms were full of grumbling about management. Faced with this labor crisis, the Anunnaki Council convenes. Enlil, ever the pragmatist when it comes to getting things done, is probably fuming, perhaps suggesting a bit of divine disciplinary action. But Enki, the wise and resourceful one, comes up with a plan, a brilliant, if somewhat ethically dubious solution. Let us create a Lulu, he proposes, a primitive worker. Let it bear the toil of the gods. And so, the project of humankind begins. This isn't just a poetic allegory for divine inspiration. The texts like the Atrahasis epic describe a very specific, almost biological process. The Atrahasis epic, a Mesopotamian masterpiece, explicitly details the gods' decision to create humans to relieve themselves of labor, providing one of the most direct textual references for this particular Anunnaki role. This isn't a fringe interpretation of a vague passage. It's a central theme of a major mythological work. The process itself is fascinatingly detailed. Enki, with the help of the mother goddess Nintu, also known as Ninhursag or Mami, undertakes the task. They need a divine ingredient, a god's blood or essence, mixed with the clay of the earth. One of the gods, Geshtui, described as having intelligence, is sacrificed, his blood and flesh mixed with clay. Ninta then nips off 14 pieces of this mixture, 7 for males and 7 for females, and with the help of birth goddesses, these first humans are brought into being. It's a very hands-on, almost bioengineered creation. Note gentle breathing of life into a preformed statue here. This is divine genetic engineering, ancient astronaut style, if you subscribe to that interpretation. The purpose is explicitly stated. to take over the hard labor, to serve the Anunnaki, to provide them with sustenance through offerings and work. You, or rather your distant, newly formed ancestors, are, in this telling, the universe's first outsourced workforce. Suddenly, that Monday morning feeling takes on a whole new cosmic significance. This creation wasn't without its hiccups either. Early versions of humans might have been a bit buggy. Some texts allude to trial and error, to imperfect prototypes. One rather quirky and somewhat poignant story tells of Enki and Ninhursag having a creation contest after perhaps a bit too much divine beer. They create various beings with disabilities or unique characteristics, and Enki, in his wisdom, finds a societal role or purpose for each of them, a narrative that some scholars interpret as an ancient Mesopotamian exploration of diversity and social inclusion, or perhaps a mythological explanation for human variation. So even in their Let's Make Some Workers project, there's a layer of complexity, a hint that not everything went exactly to plan, or that the plan itself had unexpected and perhaps even compassionate outcomes. Once humanity is successfully created and, presumably, trained in the art of canal digging and barley harvesting, they fulfill their purpose. They toil, they multiply, they build cities, and they provide for their divine masters. The Anunnaki can finally put their feet up, at least a bit. But this creation also introduces a new dynamic, a new set of problems. Humans, it turns out, are quite good at multiplying. In fact, they're a bit too good. The texts describe how the sheer noise and clamor of burgeoning humanity start to annoy Enlil. He can't sleep, he can't think, he's got a divine headache from all the racket. Remember his earlier impatience? It's about to reach critical levels. This isn't just a grumpy god. It's a setup for future conflict, a justification for decisions that will have devastating consequences for this new, noisy race. Historians still debate whether these creation myths were literal accounts for the Sumerians, allegorical tales about societal roles, or ideological stories explaining human origins and suffering. For the ancient mind, the line between literal and metaphorical was often much blurrier than it is for us. What's clear is that these stories placed humanity in a very specific relationship with the divine, one of servitude, of obligation, but also of shared, if unequal, existence. You are made of the stuff of gods and earth, a hybrid bridge. And this unique, divinely engineered origin sets the stage for humanity's tumultuous, often tragic, but ultimately enduring relationship with their celestial creators. The Anunnaki didn't just rule from on high. They got their hands dirty, meddled in the very clay of your being, and in doing so, bound your destiny to theirs in ways that are still being debated and reinterpreted thousands of years later. You are, in a sense, their magnum opus, or perhaps their most troublesome in turn. The clamor of humanity, that noise we talked about, is growing. Your ancestors, fresh from the Anunnaki's bioengineering labs, so to speak, are proving to be remarkably successful. They're multiplying, spreading across the Mesopotamian plains, building, farming, and generally making their presence known. For Enki, this might have been a source of some satisfaction, a testament to his ingenuity. For Enlil, however, it's becoming an intolerable cosmic migraine. He, the Lord of Storm and Order, finds this burgeoning, chaotic human population increasingly disruptive to the divine serenity. He can't get his celestial beauty sleep. His divine meditations are constantly interrupted by the distant racket of humans being, well, human. And Enlil is not known for his patience or his love of unsolicited background noise. His solution? Drastic, to say the least. The Anunnaki Council is convened, and Enlil lays out his complaint. The humans are too numerous, too loud. He thunders, his voice echoing through the divine assembly. Their clamor has become unbearable. We must deal with them. And his proposed solution isn't just a strongly worded memo or a divine noise ordinance. No, Enlil, in his frustration, decides on something far more final, a great flood, a deluge to wipe the slate clean, to silence humanity once and for all. This isn't just a localized flash flood. This is a divinely decreed apocalypse, designed to eradicate mankind from the face of the earth. The other Anunnaki, perhaps reluctantly, perhaps cowed by Enlil's authority or swayed by his arguments about the disruption of cosmic order, agree to the plan. They even take an oath, swearing not to interfere, not to warn humanity of the impending doom. Imagine the tension in that celestial boardroom, the weight of such a decision. It's one thing to create a workforce. It's quite another to unanimously vote for its total annihilation. But remember Enki? The clever one, the one with a bit of a soft spot for his human creations, or at least a vested interest in his project not being completely obliterated. He's part of this council. He's taken the oath. He can't directly warn humanity. That would be a breach of divine protocol, a direct challenge to Enlil and the assembly. So, what does he do? He resorts to his characteristic cunning, his talent for finding loopholes. He goes to the reed hut of a particularly righteous and wise man, known in the Sumerian accounts as Ziusudra, and in the later, more famous Babylonian version, the Epic of Gilgamesh, as Utnapishtim. Enki doesn't speak directly to Ziusudra/Utnapishtim. Oh no, that would be breaking his oath. Instead, he speaks to the reed wall of the hut. Reed hut, wall. Reed hut, listen. Wall, pay attention, he whispers, his voice urgent, carrying through the woven reeds. He then proceeds to advise the wall to tear down its house and build a boat, a massive ark, and to load it with his family, his craftsmen, and the seed of all living things. It's a brilliant piece of divine subterfuge, a way to honor the letter of the oath while completely subverting its spirit. You can almost picture Enki winking at the wall, celestial. You didn't hear this from me, nudge nudge. Ziusudra/Utnapishtim, presumably not entirely unaccustomed to strange divine pronouncements if Enki was his patron, gets the message. He does as the wall advises. He builds the great boat, seals it with bitumen, a naturally occurring asphalt abundant in Mesopotamia, a crucial material for their waterproofing needs. The use of bitumen for waterproofing boats, buildings, and even as an adhesive was a well-established technology in ancient Mesopotamia, crucial for a river-based civilization, and loads it with his family, animals, and skilled artisans, just as the storm clouds begin to gather, dark and ominous, reflecting Enlil's grim determination then. The deluge begins. The texts describe it with terrifying power. The dams of the heavens are opened, the sluices of the deep are broken. Rain falls in a torrent, wind howl, and the waters rise, swallowing the land, the cities, the ziggurats, everything. Even the gods, the Anunnaki themselves, are said to be frightened by the sheer destructive power they've unleashed. The Epic of Gilgamesh vividly describes the gods cowering like dogs, huddled together on the ramparts of heaven, regretting their hasty decision as they watch the world drown. It's a moment of divine panic, a realization that perhaps they've gone too far. They miss the offerings, the smell of roasting meat, the comfortable servitude of humanity. It's a bit like complaining about your noisy neighbors and then, when they finally move out, realizing the silence is even more unsettling. For 6 days and 7 nights, or 7 days and 7 nights in some versions, the storm rages. The world is a churning chaos of water. Then, finally, the tempest subsides. The waters begin to recede. Ziusudra/Utnapishtim's boat comes to rest on a mountaintop, often identified as Mount Nazur. He sends out a dove, then a swallow, then a raven. When the raven doesn't return, he knows land has reappeared. He disembarks and offers a sacrifice, the sweet savor of which drifts up to the heavens. The Anunnaki, famished, and perhaps a little sheepish, gather like flies around the offering. Enlil, however, is furious when he discovers that some humans have survived. Who did this? He demands. And it's Enki, naturally, who steps forward, or is perhaps pointed out by the other gods, and confesses his clever ruse. What follows is a tense confrontation, but ultimately a reconciliation of sorts. Scholars still debate whether the Mesopotamian flood narratives were inspired by actual, localized catastrophic floods in the river valleys, or if they represent a more symbolic myth about divine judgment and renewal. The geography of Mesopotamia, with its flat plains and powerful, unpredictable rivers, certainly made it prone to devastating inundations. Perhaps these real-life traumas were amplified and mythologized into this ultimate deluge. In the aftermath, Enlil, though still a bit grumpy, seems to accept that humanity is here to stay. The Anunnaki bless the Utsidris/Utnapishtim and his wife, granting them immortality and a place among the gods, or at least a divinely sanctioned remote retirement. Humanity gets a second chance, a reboot. But the memory of the flood, the knowledge of the Anunnaki's destructive capability, and their willingness to exercise it would linger, a cautionary tale whispered down through the generations. The world has been cleansed, but the relationship between humanity and its creators is forever changed. They saved you, then almost destroyed you. Talk about mixed signals. The waters have receded, leaving behind a world scoured clean, glistening with mud and possibility. You stand on the damp earth, the air fresh and tasting of new beginnings, but also heavy with a memory of devastation. The Great Flood, the terrifying act of divine judgment orchestrated by a thoroughly annoyed Enlil, has passed. Thanks to Enki's clever intervention, remember him whispering to the wall, a masterclass in divine plausible deniability? A remnant of humanity, sheltered in Zayusidris/Utnapishtim's massive boat, has survived. But what now? The old cities are submerged ruins, the fields are saturated, and the relationship with the Anunnaki has been, to put it mildly, severely tested. It's like emerging from your basement after a particularly destructive hurricane. Only the hurricane was divinely ordained, and your landlord, who caused it, is now expecting you to rebuild and get back to paying rent, in the form of sacrifices, of course. The Anunnaki, having perhaps learned a lesson about the downsides of total annihilation, namely, no more delicious roasting meat wafting up to the heavens, seem to adopt a slightly different approach in this post-Diluvian world. They don't just abandon humanity to its fate. Instead, according to the myths and king lists, they reestablish order, they decree the fates anew, and they once again lower kingship from heaven to guide the survivors. The Sumerian king list, a fascinating cuneiform document, records a succession of kings and dynasties, matter-of-factly stating that after the flood swept over and kingship had descended from heaven, Kish became the seat of kingship. This establishes a clear demarcation, the world before the flood and the world after. And in this new world, the Anunnaki are still very much in charge, albeit perhaps with a newfound, if grudging respect for human resilience, or at least for their ability to produce tasty sacrificial animals. The task of rebuilding civilization is immense. Imagine the scene, survivors huddling together, surveying the muddy desolation, the remnants of their old lives buried under layers of silt. But humans, as we know, are adaptable. Led by new kings, divinely appointed and presumably carrying the Anunnaki's seal of approval, they begin again. New cities rise, often on the sites of the old ones, a testament to the enduring human spirit and perhaps a bit of divine urban planning. The skills preserved on the Ark by Zayusidris/Utnapishtim's craftsmen, the knowledge of building, farming, weaving, metalworking, are now invaluable. It's a fresh start, but one shadowed by the knowledge of what the gods are capable of. Every unusually heavy rainstorm must have sent a shiver of fear down their spines. Is Enlil having another bad day? They'd mutter, probably triple-checking their noise levels. The Anunnaki themselves, while perhaps not walking among mortals as frequently or as casually as some pre-flood tales might suggest, are still the ultimate authority. Their temples are rebuilt, grander than before, their cults re-established. The system of offerings and rituals resumes, perhaps with an added fervor, a desperate plea to keep the divine powers happy and the floodgates firmly closed. The priests and scribes get busy, reinterpreting the old stories, perhaps adding a few new cautionary verses, ensuring that the lessons of the flood are not forgotten. The relationship is still one of servitude, but perhaps now tinged with a shared trauma, a sense that gods and mortals are, in some strange way, stuck with each other on this post-apocalyptic planet. One of the interesting aspects of this renewed world is the sense that the Anunnaki, or at least some of them, take a more direct hand in organizing human society. They assign territories, they lay down laws, they establish the norms of civilization. It's as if, having nearly wiped the slate clean, they want to make sure this new iteration of humanity develops along lines more acceptable to them. Enlil, despite his previous genocidal tendencies, is still a major player, his decrees shaping the political landscape. Enki, of course, continues his role as the purveyor of wisdom and skills, helping humanity to rebuild and innovate. There's a sense of cosmic micromanagement, as if the divine landlords are now taking a much closer interest in the behavior of their tenants. One quirky detail from Mesopotamian mythology is the concept of the me, pronounced me, which were divine decrees or powers embodying all the essential aspects of civilization, from kingship and priesthood to crafts like leatherworking and music, and even abstract concepts like truth and falsehood. These me were believed to be held by the gods, particularly Enki, and could be bestowed upon, or sometimes even stolen by other gods or cities, influencing their fortunes. Imagine these as divine software packages for running a society, and Enki as the chief systems administrator, occasionally dealing with unauthorized downloads by ambitious minor deities. The reign of the Anunnaki in this reborn world isn't just about grand pronouncements and temple worship. It's woven into the fabric of daily life. The agricultural cycle, the legal system, the social hierarchy, all are understood to be reflections of divine will, ordained by the Anunnaki. Kings rule as their chosen representatives, their earthly shepherds. Justice is administered in their name. The success of a harvest, the outcome of a battle, the birth of a healthy child, all are seen as signs of their favor or displeasure. Historians still debate the extent to which the average Mesopotamian genuinely believed in the constant, direct intervention of the Anunnaki in their personal lives, versus seeing them as more distant, cosmic forces whose influence was primarily felt through major societal events or natural phenomena. It was likely a spectrum, from the deeply devout to the more pragmatically compliant. You didn't necessarily need to like your cosmic overlords, but you definitely needed to keep them happy, or at least not actively angry. So the world after the waters is a world remade, a world under new management, or rather, under the continued, slightly chastened management of the Anunnaki. Humanity 2.0 is up and running, learning from the mistakes of the past. Mostly, don't be too noisy. The rhythm of life resumes, the fields are tilled, the cities grow, and the ziggurats once again scrape the sky, silent testimonies to the enduring power of the gods and the tenacious spirit of the mortals who serve them. The Anunnaki are still there, in the heavens, in their temples, in the whispers of the priests, their presence a constant reminder of who's really in charge. But the memory of the flood and Enki's life-saving trickery adds a new layer to their story, a hint that even in the face of divine wrath, there's room for ingenuity, for survival, and perhaps for a very, very carefully worded appeal to the more sympathetic members of the celestial board millennia pass. The mud-brick cities of Sumer and Akkad crumble, their ziggurats erode, and the cuneiform tablets bearing the stories of Enlil's wrath and Enki's cunning are buried beneath the sands of time, waiting. The Anunnaki, once the vibrant, demanding deities of a living, breathing civilization, fade into the realm of obscure mythology, their names known only to a handful of scholars who can decipher the ancient scripts. The world moves on, new empires rise and fall, new religions offer new explanations for the cosmos and humanity's place within it. The direct, often tangible presence of the Anunnaki in human affairs, so palpable in ancient Mesopotamia, seems to have vanished, hidden like the tablets themselves. That is, until the 20th century, when a controversial author named Zecharia Sitchin takes these ancient texts and propels the Anunnaki from the dusty archives of academia into the bright, often glaring, light of popular speculation. You find yourself in a different kind of landscape now, not of sun-baked plains, but of library stacks, lecture halls, and the burgeoning internet forums of the late 20th and early 21st centuries. The air isn't thick with incense, but with the scent of old paper, new theories, and the distinct aroma of passionate, often heated debate. Zecharia Sitchin, born in Azerbaijan and raised in Palestine, was an economist by profession, but his passion lay in ancient languages, archaeology, and the Hebrew Bible. He taught himself Sumerian cuneiform and, armed with this knowledge, delved into the mythological texts we've been exploring. But Sitchin didn't see just gods and allegories. He saw something far more literal. He saw astronauts. Sitchin's central thesis, laid out in his influential 1976 book, The 12th Planet, and expanded upon in numerous subsequent volumes, is that the Anunnaki were not merely mythological figures, the products of Sumerian religious imagination. Instead, he proposed, they were flesh and blood extraterrestrial beings from a yet undiscovered planet in our own solar system, a planet he called Nibiru. According to Sitchin, Nibiru has a long, elliptical orbit, bringing it into the vicinity of Earth only once every 3,600 years. And it was during these periodic passages, he claimed, that the Anunnaki descended to Earth, not just as divine observers, but as colonizers and miners. This is a radical reinterpretation, to say the least. Forget divine radiance or melem. Sitchin envisioned spaceships, advanced technology, and beings who, while powerful, were driven by very material needs. It's like taking those ancient stories and running them through a science fiction translator. Suddenly, those who from heaven to earth came takes on a very different, very specific meaning. Sitchin meticulously went through the Sumerian texts, reinterpreting names, events, and descriptions through this extraterrestrial lens. Anu, Enlil, and Enki weren't just gods. They were commanders, leaders of the Nibirian expedition. The sky chariots, or boats of heaven mentioned in some texts weren't metaphorical. They were spacecraft. The melem, that terrifying divine aura? Perhaps some kind of advanced technological suit or energy field. Even the creation of humanity, that story of Enki and Ninta mixing divine essence with clay, was, in Sitchin's view, a literal account of genetic engineering. He proposed that the Anunnaki, needing workers for their earthly operations, we'll get to why they needed workers shortly, found early hominids on Earth and upgraded them, splicing their own Anunnaki DNA with that of Homo erectus to create Homo sapiens, us, as a slave race, the Lulu, designed to toil in their mines. Remember that cosmic labor dispute? Sitchin took it very, very literally. This reinterpretation resonated with a public increasingly fascinated by UFOs, ancient mysteries, and the possibility of extraterrestrial life. Sitchin's books became bestsellers, translated into multiple languages, sparking a global phenomenon. He wasn't just presenting a theory, he was offering a grand, unified narrative that seemed to explain many of the puzzles of ancient history: the sudden rise of Sumerian civilization, the advanced astronomical knowledge of ancient cultures, the colossal scale of certain ancient monuments, and even biblical stories like the Nephilim, the giants or fallen ones mentioned in Genesis, whom Sitchin equated with the Anunnaki. Mainstream historians and archaeologists, it must be said, overwhelmingly reject Sitchin's theories, citing misinterpretations of ancient texts, linguistic inaccuracies, and a lack of supporting archaeological or astronomical evidence for a planet like Nibiru. The academic consensus is that Sitchin's work is pseudoscience, a captivating narrative built on a flawed understanding of Mesopotamian culture and language. Yet, the appeal of Sitchin's ideas is undeniable. He tapped into a deep-seated human desire to connect with something ancient something mysterious, something bigger than ourselves. And his theories provided a seemingly coherent, if highly speculative, framework for doing so. One quirky and often cited element of Sitchin's work is his interpretation of Sumerian cylinder seals, particularly one known as VA-243, which he claimed depicted our solar system with an extra planet, Nibiru, between Mars and Jupiter. Most scholars, however, interpret the symbols on this seal differently, often as stars or purely symbolic representations, not a literal astronomical map. The debate over the interpretation of ancient iconography, like cylinder seal VA-243, highlights the chasm between Sitchin's approach and mainstream academic methodology. Is it a coded message from ancient astronauts, or a symbolic expression within a known cultural context? Sitchin's work, regardless of its academic standing, has had a profound impact on popular culture and alternative history circles. He effectively resurrected the Anunnaki from ancient obscurity and recast them as the progenitors, the puppet masters, the ancient astronauts who shape human destiny. He gave them a home planet, a motive, and a timeline. He made them, in a strange way, more relatable, more comprehensible, by stripping away some of the overtly mythological elements and replacing them with a science fiction narrative. It's a powerful story, one that continues to fuel speculation, inspire countless websites, documentaries, and late-night conversations. Whether you see him as a visionary who decoded ancient secrets or a fantasist who spun an elaborate tale, Zecharia Sitchin undeniably changed the conversation about the Anunnaki, transforming them from forgotten gods into the central figures of modern mythos about our cosmic origins. The whispers from Sumer, filtered through Sitchin's lens, became a shout heard around the world. So you've encountered Zecharia Sitchin and his electrifying, if academically contentious, theories. He didn't just bring the Anunnaki back into popular consciousness. He gave them an address, a specific point of origin in the vastness of space, the planet Nibiru. This isn't just some vague celestial realm, the highest heavens of Sumerian cosmology. According to Sitchin, Nibiru is a tangible, physical world, a rogue member of our own solar system with a highly unusual and elongated orbit. Imagine a cosmic boomerang, swinging out into the cold, dark depths beyond Pluto, only to return to the inner solar system, passing between Mars and Jupiter every 3,600 Earth years. This, Sitchin claimed, is the homeworld of the Anunnaki, the planet of the crossing, and its periodic return is the catalyst for their interventions in human affairs. Sitchin's description of Nibiru is drawn from his interpretations of Sumerian texts, particularly the Enuma Elish, which, as you'll recall, is the Babylonian creation epic with Sumerian roots. Mainstream scholarship views the Enuma Elish as a mythological account of cosmic battles between gods, symbolizing the creation of order from chaos, with the god Marduk representing Babylon, achieving supremacy. Sitchin, however, read it as a surprisingly accurate, if allegorical, account of early solar system celestial mechanics. He proposed that Nibiru, entering the solar system eons ago, collided catastrophically with an ancient planet called Tiamat. This cosmic fender bender, according to Sitchin, resulted in the formation of Earth from one half of Tiamat, the asteroid belt from the other shattered half and Tiamat's moons, and Tiamat's main moon, Kingu, being captured as Earth's moon. Nibiru itself, though scarred, survived and was locked into its new 3,600-year orbit. It's a dramatic story, a planetary billiards game of epic proportions. Now, how does this fit with the Anunnaki? Sitchin argued that the Anunnaki are the highly advanced, intelligent inhabitants of this wandering world, Nibiru. Their planet, being so far from the sun for most of its orbit, was supposedly facing an atmospheric crisis, its internal heat dissipating, threatening its habitability. The Nibiruan scientists, in Sitchin's narrative, determined that suspending gold particles in their upper atmosphere could create a kind of thermal blanket, reflecting heat and light and saving their world. This is where Earth enters the picture. Earth, rich in gold, became the target of an Anunnaki expeditionary force. They came not as gods in the traditional sense, but as miners, astronauts on a desperate mission to save their home planet. This provides a very tangible, almost mundane, if you can call an intergalactic gold rush mundane, motive for their presence on Earth, a far cry from the often inscrutable whims of mythological deities. Forget divine judgment. Think resource acquisition. It's less about your sins and more about your planet's mineral deposits. Sitchin's Nibiru is not recognized by mainstream astronomy. No evidence for such a planet with a 3,600-year orbit that regularly passes through the inner solar system has ever been found, despite extensive sky surveys and sophisticated orbital calculations. The gravitational effects of such a massive body making regular passages would be easily detectable in the orbits of other planets and comets, and they simply aren't there. This is one of the primary scientific objections to Sitchin's theories. Proponents, however, sometimes suggest Nibiru is cloaked or on an orbit so unusual it evades detection, or that evidence is being suppressed. The search for Planet 9, a hypothetical large planet far out in the Kuiper Belt, theorized by some astronomers based on the odd orbits of certain trans-Neptunian objects, has sometimes been conflated with Nibiru by popular writers, though the characteristics and proposed orbits are vastly different from Sitchin's description. It's an example of how a genuine scientific inquiry can be co-opted to lend credence to more speculative ideas. Despite the lack of scientific corroboration, the idea of Nibiru has taken on a life of its own, especially in eschatological and doomsday circles. The notion of a large planetary body periodically returning to the inner solar system has fueled countless predictions of cataclysmic events, pole shifts, and global disasters, often tied to specific dates when Nibiru is due to return. These predictions have, of course, consistently failed to materialize, much to the relief of, well, everyone. It's a classic case of a fringe theory taking on a darker, more apocalyptic tone as it spreads through popular culture. Remember that gentle ASMR cadence we're aiming for? Imagining a rogue planet smashing into Earth doesn't quite fit the sleepy vibe, does it? One quirky aspect of the Nibiru theory is how Sitchin wove it into the Anunnaki hierarchy and even their biology. He suggested that the Anunnaki, adapted to Nibiru's long orbital period, had lifespans that seemed godlike to early humans, stretching over thousands of Earth years. This, he argued, explained the seemingly immense ages of the Sumerian gods and kings. He also proposed that Enlil and Enki were sons of Anu, the ruler of Nibiru, and their rivalry was, in part, a reflection of Nibiruan politics and succession struggles, played out on a distant colonial outpost, Earth. The very name Anunnaki, which Sitchin often translated as those who from heaven to earth came, became in his framework a literal job description for these interplanetary travelers. So whether you see Nibiru as a phantom planet born from misinterpretation or a hidden homeworld waiting to be rediscovered, its story is now inextricably linked with a modern mythos of the Anunnaki. It provides an origin, a motive, and a ticking clock, that 3,600-year orbit, for their return. It transforms the Anunnaki from purely spiritual or mythological beings into extraterrestrials with a home address, albeit one that doesn't show up on any conventional star charts. It's a journey that takes you from the fertile crescent of ancient Mesopotamia to the cold, speculative outer reaches of our solar system, all in search of these enigmatic sky beings and the world they supposedly came from. The journey to Nibiru is a journey into the heart of Sitchin's cosmology, a place where ancient myth and modern ufology collide. You're now standing, metaphorically speaking, at the entrance of a vast ancient mine. The air is cool and damp, and you can almost hear the distant rhythmic clang of tools against rock. According to Zecharia Sitchin's narrative, this is the Anunnaki's primary work site on Earth, the reason they traveled light years from their imperiled home planet, Nibiru. And what precious resource were they after? The one thing that could supposedly save their world by creating a reflective shield in its thinning atmosphere. Gold. Not for jewelry, not for currency, not for gaudy celestial bling, but for its unique properties when dispersed as fine particles, a high-tech atmospheric solution to a planetary crisis. This quest for gold, in Sitchin's view, is the central driving motivation behind the entire Anunnaki presence on Earth, the linchpin of their colonial enterprise. This focus on gold as the Anunnaki's primary objective reframes many of the ancient myths. The toil of the junior Ijiji gods, their subsequent rebellion, and Enki's proposal to create human workers. It all becomes part of a grand, interplanetary mining operation. The Anunnaki weren't just here to hang out and demand sacrifices. They were here on a mission, a desperate resource extraction project. Sitchin pointed to ancient gold mines in southern Africa, some dating back tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands of years, as evidence of these Anunnaki operations, predating known human mining activities by a vast margin. He suggested these were the very mines where the early genetically engineered humans, the Lulu, were put to work, digging out the precious metal under the supervision of their Anunnaki overseers. It's a narrative that paints a picture of Earth as a sort of cosmic Klondike, with humans as the unwilling, bioengineered prospectors. Suddenly, your gold fillings feel a bit implicated. The logistics of this supposed operation are staggering to consider. If Nibiru only passes through the inner solar system every 3,600 years, the Anunnaki would have needed to establish long-term bases on Earth, mine vast quantities of gold, process it. Sitchin suggested they needed it in a very fine monoatomic form for their atmospheric shield, and then transport it back to Nibiru during its periodic flybys. This implies a level of technological sophistication far beyond anything conventionally attributed to ancient civilizations, spacecraft capable of interplanetary travel, advanced mining and refining techniques, and the ability to manage a long-term off-world colony. Sitchin found hints of these technologies, he believed, encoded in Sumerian art and text, depictions of winged discs, spacecraft, gods wearing what looked like helmets and goggles, and descriptions of powerful, almost magical tools. The mainstream archaeological view, of course, is that ancient gold mining, while certainly practiced in many cultures including those in Africa, was on a scale and technological level entirely consistent with known human development, with no need for extraterrestrial intervention. The evidence for truly ancient pre-human, technologically advanced mining operations is considered tenuous or misinterpreted by most scholars. But why gold specifically? Sitchin emphasized its inertness, its malleability, and its supposed efficacy in creating a stable atmospheric shield when dispersed as nanoparticles. While gold nanoparticles do have unique optical and electronic properties and are being researched today for various applications, including in medicine and electronics, the idea of using them to repair a planetary atmosphere on an Nibiruan scale is highly speculative, to say the least. There is no established scientific basis for the claim that gold particles could effectively shield an entire planet from heat loss in the way Sitchin described. It's one of those areas where the scientific plausibility of his technical claims is heavily questioned. However, for the narrative, gold provides a compelling, almost alchemical focus. It's a substance long associated with divinity, immortality, and power in human cultures, so its choice as the Anunnaki's target resonates on a symbolic level, even if the atmospheric science is a bit wobbly. One quirky and rather specific detail Sitchin focused on was the idea that the Anunnaki established their first earthly base, Eridu Enki City, remember, in Mesopotamia precisely because it was geographically suitable for their operations and perhaps had access to gold resources, or was a good staging point for operations further afield, like in Africa. He also suggested that the Abzu, Enki's domain of subterranean waters, was not just a mythological concept but referred to the deep mining operations in southern Africa, with Abzu meaning something like deep source or primeval source, which he connected to gold. This interpretation, like many of Sitchin's, relies on specific etymological arguments that are not widely accepted by linguists specializing in Sumerian. Scholars still debate the precise meaning and geographical reference of Abzu in Sumerian texts, with most interpretations linking it to primordial freshwater sources, cosmic underground oceans, or Enki's sacred watery domain, rather than literal gold mines in Africa. The sheer amount of gold supposedly mined and transported back to Nibiru would have been astronomical. Imagine the infrastructure required, the energy demands, the workforce. It paints a picture of Earth as a massive, exploited resource pit, all for the sake of a distant, dying planet. This narrative also provides an explanation for why the Anunnaki eventually left, or at least scaled back their operations. Perhaps they got enough gold, perhaps Nibiru was saved, or perhaps internal conflicts among the Anunnaki or rebellions by their human workforce again made the Earth project untenable. Sitchin suggested that as Nibiru moved further away on its orbit, direct intervention became more difficult, and the Anunnaki gradually withdrew, leaving humanity to its own devices, but with a legacy of their genetic imprint and a memory of their gods who came from the sky. So, as you ponder this grand cosmic gold rush, you can see how it provides a powerful, if controversial, engine for Sitchin's entire Anunnaki narrative. It gives them a clear, understandable, if self-serving, motive. It explains their need for human workers. It accounts for their advanced technology and their long-term presence on Earth. It turns the mythical tales of gods and heroes into chapters of an interplanetary saga of resource exploitation. Whether you find this plausible or not, the image of the Anunnaki as celestial gold miners toiling alongside their specially created human workforce is a potent one and a cornerstone of their modern reimagining. It makes you look at that gold ring on your finger or that gold leaf on an ancient manuscript in a slightly different, more Nibiruan light. The idea of the Anunnaki as extraterrestrial miners desperately seeking gold to save Nibiru naturally leads to another tantalizing question. What kind of technology did they possess? If they were capable of interplanetary travel, genetic engineering, and managing a planet-wide resource extraction operation for millennia, they must have wielded tools and knowledge far beyond anything we associate with ancient Sumer, or even with our current capabilities in some respects. Sitchin and other proponents of ancient astronaut theories point to various enigmatic artifacts, colossal constructions, and puzzling passages in ancient texts as evidence of these lost, super-advanced Anunnaki technologies. You find yourself sifting through these alleged clues, trying to piece together a picture of a civilization that could build spaceships and tinker with DNA, while early humans were still figuring out the finer points of pointy sticks. One of the most frequently cited categories of evidence is megalithic architecture. Think of the massive, precision-cut stone blocks found at sites like Baalbek in Lebanon, with its trilithon stones weighing an estimated 800 to 1,000 tons each, or Puma Punku in Bolivia, with its intricate H-blocks displaying incredibly precise angles and smooth surfaces. How, ask the theorists, could ancient peoples with supposedly primitive tools quarry, transport, and assemble such colossal stones with such accuracy? The conventional archaeological explanations involve immense manpower, ingenious engineering using ramps, rollers, levers, and a great deal of time and social organization. The quarrying and movement of the massive stones at Baalbek, for instance, are generally attributed by historians to Roman engineering prowess during the imperial period. As the temple complex, there was a major Roman religious site dedicated to Jupiter, Venus, and Bacchus. However, ancient astronaut theorists often suggest these sites are far older, perhaps pre-Roman or even pre-human in their earliest phases, built by or with the help of Anunnaki technology, perhaps some form of levitation device, sonic cutters, or energy weapons that could soften and shape stone. It's a lot more exciting than imagining thousands of workers with ropes and rollers, even if the latter is more historically grounded than there are the depictions in ancient art. You've probably seen images from various cultures, Egyptian, Mayan, Sumerian, that, when viewed with a modern tech-savvy eye, can seem to resemble rockets, astronauts in helmets, or complex machinery. Sitchin, for example, interpreted certain Sumerian cylinder seals showing winged discs as representations of Anunnaki spacecraft. He pointed to figures wearing horned helmets or unusual attire as Nibiruan astronauts in their gear. Sumerian iconography is rich and complex, and mainstream scholars interpret these elements within the established religious and mythological context. Winged discs typically represent solar deities or divine symbols of power. Horned helmets are common attributes of divinity, and unusual attire often denotes specific priestly roles or divine status. Is it a god or an astronaut? Debate is a classic Rorschach test for one's belief system. One person sees a divine symbol, another sees a schematic for a flying saucer. The texts themselves, according to Sitchin, contain clues. He interpreted descriptions of the gods Melem, that divine radiance, not as a spiritual aura, but as the glow of their advanced suits or the energy fields of their craft. He found passages that he believed described aerial battles between different Anunnaki factions, using weapons of terror that sound suspiciously like modern advanced weaponry. The story of Sodom and Gomorrah in the Bible, for instance, with its fiery destruction, has been interpreted by some as an account of a nuclear or energy weapon attack by Anunnaki forces. Even the creation of Adamu and Tiamat, Sitchin's terms for the first humans, through the mixing of Anunnaki essence and earthly clay, is presented as a detailed, if allegorical, description of genetic engineering in a laboratory setting. Think of Enki not just as a god of wisdom, but as a chief geneticist in a high-tech Anunnaki lab, carefully splicing genes. Remember that crocodile dung sunscreen from ancient Egypt we might have joked about in another context? The Anunnaki were probably using SPF 5 billion. A particularly quirky and often discussed artifact in this context is the Baghdad Battery, a set of terracotta pots containing copper cylinders and iron rods, discovered near Baghdad and dating to the Parthian or Sasanian periods, roughly 250 BCE to 640 CE. Some have speculated these could have been ancient galvanic cells used for electroplating gold onto silver, a surprisingly advanced, if rudimentary, form of electrical technology. While the exact purpose of these artifacts is still debated by archaeologists, some suggest they were simply storage vessels for sacred scrolls. Their potential as simple batteries fuels speculation about lost ancient electrical knowledge, perhaps a watered-down inheritance from Anunnaki technology. Imagine an Anunnaki in turn accidentally leaving behind a how-to-make-a-battery instruction manual, written on a clay tablet, of course. Scholars still debate the precise level of scientific and technological understanding in ancient Mesopotamia, particularly in fields like astronomy and mathematics, which were remarkably advanced for their time, but are generally seen as developing from practical needs like agriculture, calendrics, and record-keeping, rather than from inherited extraterrestrial knowledge. The Sumerians, for example, developed a sophisticated sexagesimal, base 60 numbering system, which we still use today for measuring time and angles. Was this a purely human invention, or a simplified version of Anunnaki mathematics? Sitchin and his followers would lean towards the latter, suggesting that much of early human knowledge was a gift or a leak from their celestial overseers. So, when you ponder these lost technologies, you're entering a realm of fascinating what-ifs. What if those giant stones were moved by sound? What if those ancient carvings really do show rockets? What if the gods' magic was just misunderstood superscience? It's a compelling narrative, transforming ancient myths into a kind of technological detective story. The challenge, of course, lies in separating plausible, if speculative, interpretation from pure fantasy, and in recognizing the very real ingenuity and achievements of ancient peoples without necessarily resorting to extraterrestrial intervention. But the allure of discovering a forgotten, advanced technology, a relic of the Anunnaki's reign on Earth, remains a powerful draw, promising to unlock the secrets of our past and perhaps even our future. The question is, are we looking at misunderstood magic or misapplied science fiction? As you delve deeper into the Anunnaki enigma, particularly through the lens of Sitchin and similar theorists, you begin to notice something intriguing. the stories don't just stop in Sumer. If these powerful, technologically advanced beings were present on Earth for thousands of years, conducting global mining operations and even tinkering with human genetics, surely their influence wouldn't be confined to Mesopotamia alone. And indeed, proponents of the ancient astronaut theory argue that the Anunnaki left their footprints, or at least strong thematic echoes, in the myths, legends, and archaeological sites of cultures all around the world. You start to see tantalizing parallels, recurring motifs that suggest a shared ancient source, a kind of global Anunnaki franchise, if you will. Think about it. If the Anunnaki had established a primary base in Mesopotamia, as Sitchin proposed with Eridu, they would still need outposts, operational centers, and perhaps even leisure resorts. Celestial beings need vacations too, right? In other parts of the world to manage their gold extraction and other interests. This idea opens up a whole new vista of connections. Suddenly, the pyramid builders of Egypt, the sophisticated astronomers of the Maya, the giant statue carvers of Easter Island, and the builders of megalithic sites across Europe and the Americas are drawn into the Anunnaki narrative. Were their achievements solely their own, or were they also beneficiaries, or perhaps subjects, of Anunnaki knowledge and influence? One of the most common parallels drawn is with ancient Egypt. The Egyptian pantheon, with powerful gods like Ra, Osiris, Isis, and Horus, shares certain characteristics with the Mesopotamian deities. There are stories of gods who came from the sky, who ruled over humanity, who engaged in divine battles and family squabbles, and who possessed incredible powers. The Egyptian obsession with the afterlife, mummification, and the construction of monumental tombs like the pyramids is sometimes interpreted by ancient astronaut theorists as an attempt to emulate or preserve the knowledge of the gods, the Anunnaki, who had seemingly conquered death or possessed incredibly long lifespans. The precise dating of the Great Sphinx of Giza remains a subject of some scholarly debate, with the mainstream view attributing it to Pharaoh Khafre around 2500 BCE, though some fringe theories propose a much earlier, pre-dynastic origin, potentially linking it to a lost civilization or, in this context, Anunnaki influence. Could the Sphinx be an Anunnaki survey marker, or perhaps a portrait of a prominent Nibiruan commander, gazing stoically out over their earthly domain? Then you travel, in your mind's eye, across the Atlantic to the Americas. The civilizations of Mesoamerica, the Olmec, Maya, Aztec, and Inca, also have creation myths involving sky gods, feathered serpents, Quetzalcoatl, Kukulkan, who brought knowledge and civilization, and tales of cataclysms and subsequent renewals, reminiscent of the Sumerian flood story. The sophisticated Mayan calendar, with its incredibly accurate astronomical calculations, and the precision of Inca stonework at sites like Sacsayhuaman and Machu Picchu, are often cited as evidence of knowledge that seems out of place for its time. Could Quetzalcoatl, the wise lawgiver and bringer of civilization, have been an Anunnaki emissary, perhaps Enki himself under a different guise, spreading those divine decrees of civilization, to a new continent? Mainstream archaeology and anthropology, of course, trace the development of these civilizations to indigenous innovation over many centuries, highlighting their unique cultural trajectories without requiring extraterrestrial intervention. Even in distant Asia, you find echoes. Hindu scriptures like the Vedas and Puranas speak of Vimanas, flying chariots or palaces of the gods, capable of incredible speeds and even space travel. They describe devastating wars fought with celestial weapons that sound unnervingly like modern superweapons, causing immense destruction. Could these be accounts of Anunnaki technology and conflicts, filtered through a different cultural lens? The detailed descriptions of these Vimanas, their construction, and their capabilities are strikingly specific in some texts. A quirky, often cited example is the mention in some Vedic texts of specific diets or protocols for pilots of Vimanas, or even discussions about the different types of aerial vehicles and their power sources. While these are generally understood within a mythological or allegorical framework by scholars of Sanskrit literature, ancient astronaut theorists see them as tantalizing hints of forgotten technological traditions. The core idea here is that the Anunnaki weren't just Sumerian gods. They were a global phenomenon, their story fragmented and adapted by different cultures around the world, each retaining certain core elements: sky beings, advanced knowledge, creation of humans, a great flood, and a promise of return. This diffusionist model, where a central, advanced culture, in this case the Anunnaki, spreads its influence worldwide, is a common theme in alternative history. It attempts to explain similarities between disparate ancient cultures by proposing a common, often lost, source. Historians still argue about the extent and nature of transoceanic contact between ancient civilizations prior to the age of exploration, with most evidence suggesting that while some limited exchanges may have occurred, the major ancient civilizations developed largely independently, their similarities often being the result of convergent evolution. Similar human responses to similar environmental or social challenges, rather than direct global diffusion from a single source. So, as you trace these alleged global footprints, you're essentially looking for patterns, for recurring symbols and narratives that might betray an Anunnaki signature. It's like being a detective sifting through a vast, planet-sized collection of myths and legends, searching for the fingerprints of these elusive sky beings. Did Enlil's stern pronouncements echo in the thunderous voice of Zeus or Jupiter? Did Enki's wisdom find its way into the teachings of Thoth or Hermes Trismegistus? The connections are often speculative, relying on broad thematic similarities rather than direct, verifiable links. But the idea of a single, overarching Anunnaki narrative playing out on a global stage is a powerful one. It suggests that the whispers you first heard in Sumer were not isolated murmurs, but part of a much larger, planetary chorus, all singing different verses of the same ancient, epic song of gods who came from the stars. The idea of the Anunnaki is not just ancient gods or even ancient astronauts, but as beings who might still be subtly influencing human affairs, takes us into even more speculative and, for some, unsettling territory. If they were so deeply involved in our creation and early history, as Sitchin and others propose, did they really just pack up their gold, wave goodbye from their Nibiruan spacecraft, and leave us entirely to our own devices? Or could it be that their influence persists, perhaps in less overt, more shadowy ways? You find yourself peering behind the curtain of recorded history, wondering if the hands pulling the strings of power, guiding the course of civilizations, might have elongated Nibiruan fingers. This line of thinking often leads to theories about secret societies, hidden bloodlines, and a control system that has been in place for millennia, orchestrated by the Anunnaki or their human descendants and collaborators. The notion is that even if the main body of Anunnaki returned to Nibiru or retreated to some hidden earthly sanctuary, they left behind a legacy, a plan, and perhaps even a select group of initiated humans to carry out their long-term agenda. These aren't your average local council meetings. We're talking about influencing empires, instigating wars, controlling economies, and subtly guiding technological and social development according to a predetermined Anunnaki design script. It's the ultimate conspiracy theory, with roots stretching back to the dawn of civilization. Forget the Illuminati. These would be the original shadowy puppeteers. Proponents of this view might point to the persistence of certain symbols of power across cultures and centuries: the eagle, the serpent, the winged disc. The all-seeing air is evidence of an enduring Anunnaki symbolic language, used by their initiated human proxies. They might look at royal bloodlines that claim descent from ancient gods, a surprisingly common claim in many cultures, actually, and wonder if these aren't just metaphorical boasts, but literal truths reflecting an Anunnaki genetic heritage carefully managed and preserved. The concept of divine right of kings, which was a powerful political and religious doctrine in many societies, asserted that a monarch is subject to no earthly authority, deriving the right to rule directly from the will of God or the gods. Could this will of the gods have originally been the will of the Anunnaki, passed down through chosen lineages? It adds a rather cosmic dimension to your understanding of monarchy. The idea that the Anunnaki might be manipulating events from behind the scenes often involves them playing a very long game. After all, if your home planet has a 3,600-year orbit, your sense of time and planning is going to be quite different from that of us short-lived humans. Wars that span decades, economic shifts that take centuries, the slow rise and fall of empires, these could all be mere moves in a vast, multi-millennial chess game orchestrated by these patient, long-lived beings. Their goals? Perhaps to ensure Earth remains a stable resource for future Nibiruan visits, or to guide humanity towards a certain technological or societal endpoint that serve their ultimate purposes, or maybe just to ensure we don't blow ourselves up before their next scheduled flyby. It's like having cosmic gardeners who prune and shape the unruly bush of human civilization. One quirky and often debated aspect of these shadowy puppeteer theories is the role of hybrid bloodlines, humans with a significant admixture of Anunnaki DNA, supposedly more intelligent, longer-lived, or possessing special abilities, and placed in positions of power to manage humanity on behalf of their extraterrestrial relatives. This ties back to Sitchin's idea of the Nephilim from the Book of Genesis, the offspring of the sons of God, Anunnaki, and the daughters of men. Are their descendants still among us, forming a hidden aristocracy, pulling the strings from their fortified mansions and corporate boardrooms? It's a narrative that resonates with a deep-seated suspicion of power and elites, giving it an ancient extraterrestrial twist. You might start looking at certain world leaders and wondering about their cheekbone structure or their unusually long board meetings. Historians still argue whether the rapid societal changes and technological leaps seen at various points in human history are solely the result of human ingenuity and cultural dynamics, or if some unexplained external catalyst might have been involved. While mainstream history finds ample explanation in purely terrestrial factors, the external catalyst door is one that ancient astronaut theorists and Anunnaki proponents love to wedge open, suggesting that these leaps were nudged or orchestrated by our Nibiruan overlords. The Renaissance, the Industrial Revolution, the Digital Age, were these all on the Anunnaki's project timeline? Of course, the idea of shadowy puppeteers controlling the world is not new, and it's often fraught with problematic associations and a tendency towards simplistic explanations for complex historical events. It can be a way of abdicating human responsibility, blaming our woes on unseen, all-powerful entities. However, within the specific context of the Anunnaki narrative we've been exploring, it's a logical, if unsettling, extension of their story. If they created us for labor, if they intervene in our development, if they possess vastly superior technology and lifespans, then the idea that they might maintain some form of discrete, long-term oversight isn't entirely out of character with the rest of their alleged behavior. So, as you ponder the grand sweep of human history, from the first cities of Sumer to the complex global society of today, you might find yourself wondering about these potential unseen influences. Are the great turning points of history merely the result of human action and chance, or are there subtler, more ancient forces at play? Are we truly the masters of our own destiny, or are we merely actors in a play written long ago by playwrights from a distant, wandering planet? The thought is a chilling one, adding a layer of cosmic intrigue to the already complex tapestry of human existence. It makes you wonder if that sudden urge you have to hoard gold jewelry isn't entirely your own. The whispers from Sumer, amplified by Sitchin's theories and echoed through tales of global footprints and shadowy puppeteers, inevitably lead to a very present, and for some very urgent question: are the Anunnaki still here? Or, if they did indeed depart for Nibiru, are they on their way back? The idea of a Nibiruan return tied to that 3,600-year orbital cycle has become a powerful undercurrent in modern Anunnaki lore, fueling speculation, anxiety, and a cottage industry of predictions about imminent contact or cataclysm. You find yourself scanning the skies, not just for familiar constellations, but for something more. If the Anunnaki are still here, where are they? Some theories propose they never truly left, but retreated to hidden bases, deep underground, beneath the oceans, or perhaps even in Antarctica, that classic hotspot for all things mysterious and conspiratorial. From these secluded enclaves, they might continue to monitor humanity, subtly influence events, and perhaps even interact with select individuals or groups, all while remaining largely invisible to the general population. Think of them as the ultimate celestial hermits, or perhaps very, very patient landlords checking in on their property without making too much fuss. It's a narrative that allows for their continued presence without requiring them to land a giant spaceship on the White House lawn, which, let's face it, would be hard to miss. Others believe that while the main Anunnaki contingent may have departed with Nibiru on its outward journey, some remain behind, perhaps a skeleton crew to keep an eye on things, or individuals who, for various reasons, chose to stay on Earth. These stay-behinds might have integrated into human society over millennia, their descendants perhaps forming those elite bloodlines we touched upon, or they might live apart, ageless observers of the human drama. The concept of long-lived, hidden masters or ascended beings guiding humanity from behind the scenes is a recurring motif in many esoteric and New Age belief systems, and the Anunnaki narrative, particularly in its modern interpretations, often dovetails with these ideas. It offers a kind of ancient pedigree for these hidden influencers. Then there's the return scenario. If Nibiru's orbit is indeed 3,600 years, and if the Anunnaki's last major interaction with Earth, perhaps around the time of the rise of Sumer or the Great Flood, happened several millennia ago, then simple math suggests another flyby could be, astronomically speaking, relatively soon. This has led to numerous attempts to calculate Nibiru's return date, often tying it to ancient calendars like the Mayan long count, which famously ended in 2012, sparking a flurry of Nibiru-related doomsday predictions, astronomical alignments, or interpretations of prophecy. These predictions, much like the earlier ones about Nibiru-induced cataclysms we mentioned, have a consistent track record of, well, not happening. Still, the anticipation, the possibility, keeps the idea alive. It's like waiting for a very infrequent, very large, and potentially very disruptive cosmic bus. What would a return entail? Here, the theories diverge wildly. Some envision a benevolent return, with the Anunnaki arriving as saviors, ready to share their advanced technology, cure diseases, and usher in a golden age for humanity. Perhaps they've finally got their atmospheric issues on Nibiru sorted and are feeling generous. Others foresee a more ominous arrival, the Nibiruan landlords returning to collect overdue rent, reassert their dominance, or perhaps harvest resources, or even humans, once more. It could be disclosure and enlightenment, or it could be Judgment Day, Anunnaki style. Remember Enlil's temper. One hopes he's done some anger management workshops during the last orbital cycle. A quirky and surprisingly prevalent idea in some circles is that governments around the world are aware of the Anunnaki and the impending return of Nibiru and are secretly preparing for it, possibly even collaborating with certain Anunnaki factions. This fuels theories about underground bunkers for the elite, secret space programs, and a global cover-up designed to prevent mass panic. It's a narrative that combines the ancient astronaut theory with modern government conspiracy tropes, creating a potent cocktail of paranoia and anticipation. The truth is out there, but it's apparently classified above top secret and probably involves a lot of gold. Scholars still debate whether the cyclical views of time and history found in some ancient cultures like the Hindu Yugas or the Mesoamerican suns reflect sophisticated astronomical knowledge, purely mythological constructs, or perhaps a folk memory of recurring cosmic or environmental events. For those who believe in Nibiru's periodic return, these ancient cyclical views are seen as further evidence, a kind of encoded warning or reminder from our ancestors who experienced previous Anunnaki visitations. So, as you look out at the night sky, the stars seem to hold a new layer of meaning, a new set of questions. Are they out there watching? Are they on their way back? Will their return be a moment of joyous reunion with our creators, or a terrifying encounter with beings whose power and motives remain largely inscrutable? The whispers from Sumer have traveled a long way, evolving from ancient myths into modern anxieties and hopes. The Anunnaki, whether real extraterrestrial beings or potent mythological archetypes, continue to exert a powerful hold on the human imagination, their story tapping into our deepest questions about who we are, where we came from, and whether we are truly alone in this vast, starlit universe. The silence from the stars can be just as deafening as any rumored Nibiruan approach, and so your journey through the shadowed corridors of time and myth, seeking the elusive Anunnaki, draws toward a contemplative pause. From the Fertile Crescent where civilization first blinked in the dawn, to the speculative orbits of a phantom planet called Nibiru, from the clay tablets whispering of sky gods to the modern web forums buzzing with theories of their return, the Anunnaki have shapeshifted, yet endured. They remain an enduring enigma, a cosmic question mark hovering over the very origins of humanity and the unfolding drama of our existence. Were we to make of these beings, hidden for so long, now brought so vividly, if controversially, back into our collective consciousness? The story of the Anunnaki, as pieced together from ancient Sumerian fragments and reimagined by modern theorists like Sitchin, is a powerful one because it touches upon fundamental human concerns. It speaks to our origins. Were we a divine experiment, a cosmic accident, or the product of extraterrestrial genetic engineering? It grapples with our purpose. Are we here to serve some higher, perhaps alien, agenda, or are we free to chart our own course among the stars? It confronts our relationship with power. Are we truly autonomous, or have we been subtly guided or even controlled by forces beyond our comprehension for millennia? These are not trivial questions. They are the kind that keep philosophers, theologians, and late-night YouTube historians gainfully employed. The mainstream academic view, as we've noted, remains skeptical, to put it mildly, of the ancient astronaut interpretation of the Anunnaki. Historians and archaeologists generally see the Anunnaki as integral components of the Mesopotamian religious and mythological worldview, deities created by humans to explain the inexplicable, to give order to a chaotic world, and to legitimize societal structures. They were the gods of a specific time and place, their stories reflecting the concerns, hopes, and fears of the Sumerians, Akkadians, and Babylonians. The idea that these texts are literal accounts of extraterrestrial visitation is, for most scholars, a profound misreading, a projection of modern concerns and sci-fi tropes onto ancient cultures. It's like using a 21st century GPS to navigate a 3rd millennium BCE map. The coordinates simply don't match. Yet, the persistence of the Anunnaki narrative in popular culture suggests it fulfills a need, a desire for a grander, more mysterious past. In a world increasingly explained by science, the allure of ancient mysteries, of lost knowledge and powerful beings who walked the earth before us, is potent. It offers a sense of connection to something vast and ancient, a feeling that our mundane reality might be interwoven with threads of cosmic significance. And let's be honest, the idea of gods in spaceships mining for gold is just a cracking good story, far more thrilling than, say, the gradual development of irrigation techniques, as crucial as that was, remember? One of the most enduring legacies of the Anunnaki story, particularly in its Sitchinite interpretation, is the way it has encouraged people to look at ancient texts and artifacts with fresh, if sometimes overly imaginative eyes. It has sparked a renewed interest in ancient civilizations and their achievements. The ongoing scholarly work of translating and interpreting the vast archives of cuneiform tablets continues to reveal more about Mesopotamian society, religion, and science, painting an ever richer picture of their world, independent of any extraterrestrial theories. There are genuine wonders and profound insights to be found in these ancient records, reflecting the incredible intellectual and cultural achievements of these early civilizations. Sometimes, the truth discovered through careful scholarship can be just as awe-inspiring as the most elaborate speculative theory. A quirky and perhaps telling aspect of the Anunnaki's enduring appeal is their adaptability. They can be whatever the theorist or believer needs them to be, creators or destroyers, benefactors or exploiters, ancient gods or future saviors. This malleability allows their story to resonate across a wide spectrum of beliefs and anxieties. Are you worried about environmental catastrophe? The Anunnaki faced it on Nibiru. Concern about genetic engineering? The Anunnaki supposedly pioneered it on us. Feel like a cog in a vast, uncaring machine? You might be, if you were bioengineered for labor by Nibiruan overlords. They are a cosmic mirror, reflecting our contemporary hopes and fears back at us, dressed in ancient Mesopotamian garb. Scholars still debate the precise mechanisms by which myths and religious ideas are transmitted and transformed across cultures and over long periods. But the Anunnaki narrative, in both its ancient and modern forms, offers a fascinating case study in this process. From Sumerian hymns to internet forums, their story has been told and retold, each iteration adding new layers, new interpretations, new meanings. So, as the first hints of dawn begin to lighten the edges of your own sky, what remains of the Anunnaki? Are they historical deities, confined to the pages of academic journals and museum exhibits? Are they tangible extraterrestrial beings, currently en route from Planet X, or perhaps already here, sipping cosmic lattes in some hidden underground base? Or are they something more akin to a powerful cultural meme, a story virus that has infected the global imagination, compelling us to question, to wonder, and perhaps to look up at the stars with a renewed sense of awe and a tiny shiver of what if? The truth, as they say, might be out there, or it might be buried deep within the human psyche, in our innate need to tell stories that explain our place in this vast, mysterious universe. The Anunnaki, in whatever form you choose to perceive them, invite you to keep searching, keep questioning. Their ultimate secret might not be about their origins, but about our own enduring quest for meaning. The night has deepened around you, the journey through millennia and across cosmic vistas now settling into a quiet stillness. The figures of the Anunnaki, once so vivid and demanding, begin to soften at the edges, their thunderous pronouncements and Nibiruan spacecraft receding like the tide under a silvered moon. The weight of ancient mysteries, the thrill of speculative journeys to distant planets, and the unsettling thought of shadowy puppeteers all start to dissolve into the gentle hum of your own familiar surroundings. Perhaps the Anunnaki were exactly as the Sumerians described them, powerful, capricious gods born of a world struggling to understand itself. Perhaps they were, as Sitchin proposed, flesh and blood travelers from a dying world, their story a distorted echo in our oldest myths. Or perhaps they are a grand metaphor, a way for us to explore our deepest questions about creation, purpose, and power, cloaked in the fascinating garb of ancient Mesopotamia. Whatever the truth may be, locked away in untranslated tablets or hidden in the silent expanse between the stars, the search itself has been the adventure. You've walked the dusty plains of Sumer, deciphered celestial dramas etched in clay, and pondered the possibility of technologies that blur the line between magic and science. You've considered their alleged role in our very making, their judgments, their enigmatic legacy. Now let these thoughts drift. Let the images of ziggurats fade into the quiet darkness. The weight of their story can be laid down, at least for tonight. The universe will continue to hold its secrets, and the stars will continue their silent, ancient vigil, regardless of who or what we imagine might be journeying between them. Allow the gentle cadence of these final words to guide you towards rest. There are no tests on this tomorrow, no cuneiform to decipher before breakfast. Just the promise of sleep, deep and untroubled. The Anunnaki, whether myth or memory, can wait. For now, all that matters is the soft breath in and the gentle breath out. Thank you for your attention. Goodbye and see you again in the next stories.